Hello Year 6 and welcome to Religious Education at St Mark's. My name is Mrs Gavin and I am the Head of Religious Education. I've created this video for you to do one of three things. Number one, I'd like to share with you the big ideas that we cover in RE, and these are key concepts that you'll revisit right from Year 7 all the way to Year 11. Number two, I'd like to share with you the curriculum content for Year 7. And then thirdly, I'd like to teach you a typical lesson at St Mark's so you know what to expect when you join us for real. So outlined here are the 6 key ideas that you will revisit in your studies in RE at St Mark's. So the idea is that each year, Year 7, Year 8, Year 9, Year 10 and Year 11, you revisit the same big ideas so that at the point when you're ready to sit your GCSE, you are well versed in these ideas. I'm not going to read through them all individually for you, so it might be a nice idea for you to pause the video now and just to read through them. If you don't understand what they mean, that's not a problem. Like I mentioned, we will be going over and over these during your time with us. So this is what the course content looks like for Year 7. When you start with us in Autumn A, we will look at the school values of love, hope and trust. Then in Autumn B, we'll go on to look at the life of Jesus. And then after Christmas, in January, we'll look at the growth of the Christian church. After that, we will look at the life of the Prophet Muhammad. After the Easter holiday, we will look at the 5 pillars of Islam and the Quran. And then finally, the 6 weeks before we break up for the summer holiday, before you go into Year 8, we will study the topic of covenant. Don't worry if you don't know what any of these keywords mean. Like I mentioned before, you'll be well versed by the time you come to study them. So Year 6, we're going on to look now at what a typical lesson at St Mark's will be like when you arrive in Year 7. So every single lesson starts off with you writing down the date and the title. So the title for today's lesson is Depicting Jesus, and the word depicting just means to show or to portray. So how is Jesus shown? In paintings and drawings. That's what we're going to be focusing on in today's lesson. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to have a go at answering these questions. Okay, so maybe with a scrap piece of paper somewhere now, you could pause the video and just answer these questions. Who was Jesus? When did Jesus live? Where did Jesus live? So normally in class, you come in, we greet each other with the official greeting. You sit down, well, once I've asked you to, and while I'm taking the register, you will be answering these questions in your RE book. And then at the end of the register, we'll have some feedback. So perhaps let's practice that now. If you pause the video and you answer these questions on a scrap piece of paper, and then we'll look at the answers in just one moment. So Year 6, how did you get on? Let's have a look. Who was Jesus? This is a very loaded question, and please do not worry if you felt a little bit bamboozled by it. That's absolutely okay. In fact, my A-level students are writing 40-mark essay questions on that exact question, who was Jesus, because there's a variety of answers that could be possible, and I think it very much depends on your own faith background. So Christians believe that Jesus was the Son of God. He was the incarnation. That means that God came down to earth in human form, and that Jesus is the second person of the Trinity. That is what Christians believe. Muslims regard Jesus as a prophet, the Prophet Isa, peace be upon him, but he is not divine. That means he's not God. Whereas other people simply view Jesus as a moral teacher. So even if you were an atheist, that means somebody who doesn't believe in God, or if you don't believe in Christianity at all, there's no disputing that there was a man called Jesus of Nazareth who lived in the province of Galilee 2,000 years ago. There's historical documents, or 2,020 years ago to be more precise. There are historical documents proving that the person of Jesus did actually exist. So there's no disputing that he did exist. He was a real life person. It's just, what do you believe he was? Was he the Son of God? Was he just a prophet? Or was he just this really inspirational person who gave some really amazing teachings? When did Jesus live? Now, I've already mentioned this, okay? So Jesus lived 2,020 years ago. So what you'll notice is the date, the year that we're currently in, is always the amount of years since Jesus lived. And the reason for that is because When the Roman Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity, he was so blown away by this powerful movement and by the person of Jesus, he thought, hold on, wait a minute, let's start time again. This is such an important event. Let's scrap the calendar and start time again. So whatever year we are in is the amount of time since Jesus' birth. Where did Jesus live? Okay, so he lived in the Middle East, which is in an area which is now called Israel. He was born in a little town called Bethlehem, and he grew up in a town called Nazareth. That's why he's referred to as Jesus of Nazareth, because back in the day, your surname was where you were from. In the region of Galilee. Now, Galilee was a really interesting region. It was in the north region of Israel, and it was like the poorest region. So it was really unusual and, bizarre, really, that the Son of God was born to a family who were from a poor region. Sort of, they were looked down upon by other people. They were considered to be uneducated. And Jesus was nailed to the cross. He died in Jerusalem, which is the capital city of Israel. So year 6, at the beginning of each lesson while you're at St. Mark's, you will see a PowerPoint slide that looks like this, and this is to focus the lesson so that you understand exactly where the lesson is going. So the main focus of today's lesson is depicting Jesus. The next time we meet and have a lesson, the lesson will be Introduction to RE, so that'll be your first lesson in year 7. And why are we studying this idea of depicting Jesus? The reason is because images are powerful and they reflect a great deal about our belief system. And then in each lesson you reflect upon the big ideas that appear in this lesson. So the big ideas that are appearing in this lesson are God's love of humanity, the nature of God, and religious experience, because by viewing images of Jesus, you are interacting with Jesus in some way, depending on your belief system. Now, each lesson will also give you a little reminder of the key vocabulary that you're expected to know and understand. So the key vocabulary for this lesson is depiction, imagery, culture, belief, icon, faith, incarnation, prophet, and symbolism. Hello Year 6, I have a little activity here that I'd really like you to try and complete. Just don't worry if you get these wrong, it is just a little activity to get our brains thinking. So around the edge of this map of the world, we have 10 images of Jesus. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to look at each of the image of Jesus, and what do you think the ethnic background of each of these Jesuses are? And why is it that Jesus is being portrayed in such a variety of ethnicities? So just have a little look. I don't expect you to get it country perfect. I'd just like you to have a little look. Now, if you're at school, this would definitely be a paired activity. So you might want to try this with somebody at home and say to them, look, where do you think this Jesus comes from in the world? Could you help me point it out on the map? So just have a little go, pause the video for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll look at the answers together. Okay, Year 6. Let's go through some of the answers then. So as you can see, I've already drawn the lines to the places, so there should be no great surprises there. So the first two images, the one at the top right hand side is a manga image of Jesus, contrasted with the one on the left hand side, which is Jesus being baptized in the River Jordan by his cousin John. If you look at the face of these two men, they are Oriental, and those two images are actually from Japan. So they are examples of Japanese Jesuses. And the next image underneath Jesus's baptism image is a Native American Jesus. And we know this because he is wearing Native American style clothing and he has Native American style feathers in his hair. So the children that are with Jesus are unlikely to be his biological children. Instead, that is most probably a reference to the Gospel of Luke, where Jesus says that you need to be like small children in order to gain entrance into the kingdom of heaven, because children are sweet-natured, and Jesus wants his Christians to possess those sorts of qualities and characteristics. The image underneath that is interesting because it's a crucifixion image, but if you look closely, Jesus actually looks quite a lot like the Buddha, okay, and that image comes from South Korea. So you obviously have that Eastern influence of religion on Christianity. The next image, we see a black man who appears to be facing crucifixion, and if you look around the edge of the image, you have the various stations of the cross, and at the end you have a resurrected Christ, and that image is from Jamaica. The next image with on the other side of the text box with the metal halo is an example of an icon, and icons are used in Eastern Orthodox Christianity, and that is interesting because, as you can see, we are going towards the east of the map, east of the world map here. So we've got two examples of icons here. The first icon comes from Russia, and then the next image is another crucifixion image, and you have the picture of Jesus being taken down from the cross. Now, what's interesting about this image is that the two men who were crucified alongside Jesus, they are also depicted, and that's unusual. You don't see that often in crucifixion images of Jesus. So here we see a black Jesus, and that image is actually from Papua New Guinea. The next image is from Greece, and again it's an Orthodox image. So within Greece, most people worship in line with the Orthodox Christian tradition. Next image is very, very white. This very, very white, clean-cut Jesus is an American Jesus, and he's the sort of image that people might look to, Protestants might look to in America. It's very in line with United States style worship. And the final image that I want to talk through with you is the Sacred Heart image, very popular in Ireland. If you look at the image, Jesus has very, very pale skin. He has light blue eyes. And we know that the two images there, the American Jesus and the European Jesus, are very unlikely. Jesus was a Jewish man, okay, and Jewish people tend to be dark skinned. He was from the Middle East, so he would most definitely have had olive skin, dark eyes and dark hair. So this is an inaccurate depiction of Jesus. Okay, year 6. If we were in class now, what I'd ask you to do is I'd ask you to find a partner, and I'd like you to discuss, why do you think different cultures have depicted Jesus to look like people from that region? So, for example, the American Jesus looks a little bit like a typical white American, okay? Or the Native American Jesus looks like a Native American. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is, because we're not in school, perhaps maybe you could grab somebody from your household, discuss what you're doing in class in this lesson, and then have a little bit of a discussion about it. So pause the video, have a discussion, and then come back and then see what I've got to say on the matter, and see if it links in with what you were saying. So I'll just give you 1 minute now to go off and speak to somebody. Great, have we done that? We've come back? Fantastic. Right. So, the fact that we have all these different cultures taking on the person of Jesus is really important, okay? When people are worshipping, sometimes they might feel as if they have more relatability. They're able to relate more to the person if the person looks like them. Now, you might say that that's not a good thing, that if a Christian really loves Jesus, they should be able to accept and take on Jesus like he should be. Like, he should be depicted as a Middle Eastern man because that was where Jesus was from. So why aren't people worshipping images that look the way Jesus actually looked? And that is a very fair and valid point. But it also highlights the fact that we've got Jesus who looks like he's from Japan, the fact that we have Jesus who looks like he's from South Korea, that looks like he's from Jamaica, that looks like he's from Papua New Guinea, that is an indicator or a reminder of the fact that Christians believe that Jesus came to die for the whole of humanity. Not only that, it also reminds Christians of a verse in the Bible in Genesis 1:26 where God is creating humanity and he says he'll make them to be like us and resemble us. So God is, to paraphrase the Bible, it says that we're all made in the image and likeness of God. So that God is neither black nor white, male or female, Oriental or white European. God is everything. So in a way, the depiction of Jesus isn't as important as we might initially think. And that what is important is the fact that we have all these cultures around the world willing to take on Jesus. So for that reason, many Christians would view the fact that we have such a diverse range of images of Jesus as a positive thing. So what we're going to do next is, over the next 3 PowerPoint slides, I'm going to look into 3 different images of Jesus and shed light on what they show about how Jesus is depicted. So this image here was born out of a man called Dr. Richard Neve, and he investigated into what Jesus looked like using a skull that he managed to find that was carbon dated to the 1st century. So he's got a skull of a Jewish man from the 1st century. So this skull was effectively like Jesus's peer. And he took this skull and he used computer generated imagery, and he looked to the Bible to find other hints and clues as to what Jesus looked like. And in the book of Revelation, it says that Jesus had hair like wool. So this idea that they've got the facial structure of Jesus, the idea of his hair, his lineage, which was Jewish, they've come to the conclusion that this is the most realistic, most accurate image of what Jesus would have in fact looked like. This painting here is by an artist called Holman Hunt, and the painting is entitled The Light of the World, and it was painted in 1853. And the painting is based on 2 biblical passages. Firstly, I am the light of the world, found in John 8:12, and we know there's a reference to this because obviously because of the title, but also if you look at the image, it's very, very dark and gloomy, and you've got Jesus carrying this lantern which is illuminating the way. And the only other thing that sheds any light in the image is his halo. Okay, and you sort of see the forest around Jesus sort of glistening because of his light. And another Bible reference this is based on is in Revelation, where it says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." And we see that Jesus is raising his hand. He's got his light in the other hand, and he's raising the hand to knock at the door. Now this painting is full of imagery. So the dark forest, or the gloomy woodland, is representative of the darkness found in the human heart. Now notice the door in which Jesus is knocking on, there is no handle. What do you think this might symbolise? So I just want you to take a few minutes. Why do you think there is no handle on the door? If there's no handle on a door, how does that door open? Okay, year 6. I'd be interested to know if any of you have thought this same thinking as the artist. Okay, so the artist Holman Hunt, he deliberately did not put a handle on the door. And this links into the Christian belief that a Christian has to invite Jesus into their own heart. The person who has to open the door is the believer. Jesus isn't going to open the door for you. You have to open the door yourself, which I think is rather beautiful. So next we're going to go on to look at icons, and I mentioned before that icons are used within Orthodox Christianity, so they're used towards the east of the world in worship. And when icons are made, they are not mass produced in a factory. There is a great spiritual reflection that goes into making each icon. They are painted on wood, and while they are being painted, they are often made by monks or highly religious lay people who pray continually, sing hymns, and put a great deal of devotion into creating these images. And what Orthodox Christians believe that is when they're looking at an image, and it's either of Jesus or his mother Mary or one of the saints, and when you're looking at the image in the icon, Orthodox Christians believe that you are evoking the spirit of the person who's depicted in that icon. So let's say, for example, we were praying towards the image that's in front of us now. That would be evoking Jesus' spirit, because that image has been prayed over, and great devotion has been poured into making that image. Now, when you look at an icon, it's a bit like an optical illusion, because parts of it are 3D, but the majority of it is two-dimensional, and that is intentional. Icons are painted deliberately to look flat, and the reason for that is because they don't want to be guilty of breaking the first commandment to worship false gods. So they don't want to make the depiction too realistic, because if that was the case, you'd be worshipping the image rather than worshipping what it represents, which is key. So just want you to take a few minutes now. Look at Jesus' features. What do you notice? Look at his eyes. look at his ears, look at his nose, look at his mouth, and to a certain extent also look at his hands. Okay, so what you may or may notice is that the images are very exaggerated. So the eyes are very oval, the nose is very long and thin, the mouth is very short and stout, and the ears, they're not so much in this one, but a lot of them, they're much longer and taller than they normally would be, and the hands are very elongated. Now the reason for this is because it's meant to show how the person, be it Jesus, Mother Mary, as they'd refer to in the Orthodox Church, and the saints, are sensitive to the needs of those who pray before them, so that their senses appear different than they would do in reality, to show the idea that the saint, or Jesus in this case, is sensitive to the worshipper's needs. So at Lessons in St Mark's, we always use quizzes to assess our understanding and make sure that we're getting as much knowledge as we possibly can, and then to review anything that we're not sure of. Okay, so at this point in the lesson, I'm going to pause and we're going to have a quiz. If you can grab a piece of paper and write down the answers to these questions, and then see how well you've done. So I'll share the answers with you afterwards. So number 1, what did Dr. Richard Neve use to create his forensic Jesus? Number 2, which book of the Bible records Jesus as having hair like wool? Number 3, where in the Bible does Jesus describe himself as the light of the world? Number 4, why does the door within Holman Hunt's painting not have a door handle? Number 5, which type of Christians use icons in worship? Number 6, why are icons deliberately painted two-dimensional to appear flat? Number 7, why do ears, eyes, mouth and noses always appear exaggerated in icons? So if you could write the answers to those questions down, and then we'll go over the answers in the next slide. Thank you, Year 6. Okay, Year 6, so it's now time to mark your work. So the answer to number 1, what did Dr. Richard Neve use to create his forensic Jesus? The answer was a 1st century skull. The answer to number 2, which book of the Bible records Jesus as having hair like wool? The answer is Revelations. That's the final book of the Bible, in case you were not aware. Number 3, where in the Bible does Jesus describe himself as being the light of the world? John 8, verse 12. Number 4, why does the door within Holman Hunt's painting not have a door handle? The answer is it's a symbolic interpretation that demonstrates how a believer is required to open the door from within. So the door is like symbolic of the human heart. Okay, Year 6. Number 5, which type of Christians use icons in worship? The answer is Orthodox Christians. Number 6, why are icons deliberately painted two-dimensional to appear flat, as to not break the first commandment to worship false gods? Number 7, why do eyes, ears, mouth and noses always appear exaggerated in icons? The answer is to demonstrate how Jesus, or the saints, are sensitive to the needs of those who pray before them. Great, Year 7. So hopefully you managed to complete these 7 questions on the previous slide, and I'm curious to know what you got out of 7. To end our lesson, we always end the lesson with a plenary, and quite often that is a reflection activity. So what I'd like you to do to end this lesson is just to spend a few minutes deciding for yourself which is your favourite image of Jesus and why. And if you could just make a note of it, that'd be fantastic. And when I see you next, when I meet you for real, you can tell me all about which is your favourite image of Jesus. So thank you so much, Year 6, for listening. I wish you all the best in your transition from primary school to secondary.